There are places in Mexico where the earth swallows people. Literally. I'm not talking about clandestine graves. I'm not talking about the violence we know. I'm talking about something older, deeper, an oblivion so absolute that it wipes a family off the map. And from memory. In 1982, in a small village in the mountains of Nayarit, the Morales family disappeared. Ismael, his wife Elodia, their 2 young children. They vanished, without a trace, as if they had walked toward the horizon and simply ceased to exist. The police searched for them for a few weeks. Then they closed the case. The neighbors forgot them. Time, as always, covered the wound with a scar of indifference. 40 years, 4 decades of silence, until a young anthropologist searching for legends found a truth that should never have come to light. Today we are not going to tell the story of a crime, but rather one of salvation, a salvation that became a condemnation. We are going to enter the caves where time stood still, where a man locked away his own flesh and blood to protect them from the world, and where the world, upon finding them, finished the job he started, destroying them. If you believe that there are stories that must be told, no matter how uncomfortable they may be, if you believe that forgetting is the worst form of violence, stay with me, subscribe, and listen. Because some cries take 40 years to be heard. Sonia Alarcon wasn't looking for ghosts. She was looking for stories. She was an anthropology student, young, brilliant, full of that academic energy that hasn't yet been beaten down by reality. Her thesis, the persistence of end-of-the-world myths in isolated communities in the Sierra Madre Occidental. A specific topic, safe, nothing that could put her in danger. She spent her days in dusty villages in Nayarit, tape recorder in hand, listening to the elders, collecting stories about floods, celestial fires, and vengeful gods. It was during one of these conversations, with a nearly blind old woman named Doña Inés, that she heard the key phrase. Some didn't wait for the end. The woman whispered, her voice like the rustling of dry leaves. Some went to wait for it inside the earth. Sonia's skin prickled. Who? She asked. The Morales, replied the old woman. Crazy Ismael. He said the world was going to burn, and he took his family to the caves, to be reborn pure. Most people would have dismissed the story, local folklore, a metaphor. But Sonia was different. She heard the echoes of truth in legends. She began to investigate. No one wanted to talk about the Morales family. It was an uncomfortable memory, a wound that had not healed in the collective memory of the town. They went to the other side, some said. The forest claimed them, others said. Euphemisms, ways of not telling the truth. We abandoned them to their fate. Sonia did not give up. She spent 2 weeks in the municipal archives. The air smelled of decaying paper and stagnant time. And there, in a forgotten folder, stained with moisture, she found it. Missing Person Report. Number 237. Dated October 12th, 1982. Names: Ismael Morales, Elodia Campos de Morales, and their children, Josue and Leah, ages 6 and 4. The report was brief, full of blank spaces. The last sentence, written by a tired police officer, read, "Search suspended due to lack of clues. Presumed to have crossed the border or perished in the mountains." Presumed. The word the system uses to wash its hands. Sonia felt the weight of that folder, the weight of 40 years of nothing. She needed someone who knew the mountains. Not the tourist trails, the real mountains, the ones that don't appear on maps. Everyone gave her the same name, Don Chema, an old Huichol man, a hermit, a man who, they said, talked to the stones. She found him in a hut at the foot of the mountain. He was a man with weather-beaten skin and eyes that seemed to contain the entire history of his people. Sonia explained what she was looking for. Don Chema listened silently, carving a piece of wood. When she finished, he shook his head. "There are places where white men should not go," he said without looking at her. "There are people who chose to be forgotten. You must respect their grave." "They're not dead," Sonia insisted. "I think they're alive. They need help." Don Chema looked up. His black eyes studied her. They saw beyond her academic enthusiasm. They saw her stubbornness, her compassion. "The mountain holds no secrets," he said finally. "It just waits for the right moment to tell them." He sighed. "All right, I'll take you. But whatever you find will weigh on your soul forever." Musical pause. A dull, primitive percussion rhythm is introduced, like a heartbeat. The journey was a descent into the heart of a forgotten world. 3 days of walking. There was no trail. Don Chema moved by instinct. He read the rocks, the wind, the position of the sun. Sonia followed him, her body aching and her spirit filled with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Civilization faded away. First the noise of cars, then the last cell phone signals. Finally, the sky without airplane contrails. They were alone. In the domain of the mountain, on the 3rd day, they arrived. At a giant rock wall covered with moss and vines, a waterfall cascaded down like a veil of liquid silver. It was a place of overwhelming beauty and terrifying silence. "Behind the water," said Don Chema, pointing with his chin. "That's where the mouth is." Sonia felt a chill that wasn't from the cold dew. She moved forward, her heart pounding in her chest. The sound of the water was deafening. She passed through the liquid curtain and found herself on a stone ledge. In front of her was the entrance to a cave. Dark, deep. It was marked with strange symbols painted in red ochre. A spiral, an eye, a snake biting its tail. And then she smelled it. The smell, wood smoke, damp earth, excrement, and something else. An animal smell. Musky, the smell of humanity stripped of everything. She took a deep breath. She turned on the flashlight on her helmet. And she went in. The beam of light cut through the darkness. The cave was larger than it appeared. A natural vestibule. He saw the remains of a campfire, small animal bones, rough stone tools, and then he saw them, huddled in the back of the cave, like a litter of frightened animals. There weren't 4 of them. There were 12. 12 human figures. Their skin was pale, almost translucent. Their hair was long, matted, and caked with mud. They were dressed in rags, pieces of old clothing sewn together with raw leather and rabbit skins. The light from the lantern hit them. They cowered. They made sounds. They weren't words. They were whimpers, growls, the sound of pure fear. Sonia froze. The air was thick, unbreathable. She could feel the cold of the stone through the soles of her boots. Her mind struggled to process what she was seeing. They weren't savages. They were the descendants of Ishmael and Elodia, 3 generations born in darkness. A forbidden lineage, a micro-society created by the madness of a single man. Their eyes, accustomed to the darkness, were huge and black. Their bodies, thin, showed signs of malnutrition. and on their foreheads they all had a scar, a mark, the same spiral that was painted at the entrance, made with a crude knife, the mark of the clan, the mark of the prison. A young woman, no more than 18 years old, dared to look at her. In her eyes, there was not only fear, there was a spark of something. Curiosity? Recognition? Sonia tried to speak. "Hello?" she whispered. Her own voice sounded strange, alien. The young woman bowed her head like a bird. She did not understand the word. But she understood the tone. Slowly, Sonia raised a hand, palm open, a universal gesture of peace. An older man with a gray beard down to his chest jumped up. He shouted, a guttural sound, a warning, and everyone retreated even further, disappearing into the deepest crevices of the cave, leaving Sonia alone in the silence. She stumbled out of the cave. She fell to her knees on the wet rock. The sun blinded her. The fresh air burned her lungs. She vomited, the bitter taste of fear and shock. Her hands shook uncontrollably. She hugged herself, but the cold wasn't outside. It was inside. A cold that came from having looked directly into the abyss of time. From seeing what happens to human beings when their world is torn away from them. Don Chema was there, waiting for her. He put a hand on her shoulder. "I told you," he said softly. "Now they weigh on you." How does a man bring his family to this? What kind of faith or madness does it take? Sonia spent the next month obsessed, piecing together the story of Ismael Morales. It wasn't easy. The townspeople had sealed off that memory. But with patience and empathy, she got them to talk. And the story that emerged was that of a man broken by a world he couldn't understand. Ismael wasn't a monster. He was a man of intense faith. But his faith had soured. He belonged to a small evangelical sect that preached the imminent apocalypse. The Cold War was at its height. Nuclear fear was palpable. For most, it was a distant threat. For Ismael, it was a prophecy about to be fulfilled. He saw sin everywhere, on television, in music, in the way the women in town were starting to dress. He became a street preacher, a man shouting warnings in the town square. People laughed at him. They called him the Mad Prophet. His children were bullied at school. "Your dad says we're all going to burn," the other kids would say. Then came the final blow. He lost his land. A legal dispute with a local chieftain, a rigged trial. The system, the law of men, had failed him. It had stolen his inheritance. That was the last proof he needed. The outside world wasn't just sinful. It was corrupt. It was thieving. It was doomed. And he wasn't going to let his family go down with it. One night, he woke Elodia and their children. "It's time," he told them. "The Lord has given us an ark, not made of wood, made of stone." Elodia, a submissive woman, terrified of her husband and the vengeful God he spoke of, followed him. The children, sleepy and confused, obeyed. Ismael led them to the mountains, to the caves he had prepared for months, carrying tools, seeds, a Bible. He told them that the outside world would burn in nuclear fire, and that they, the Morales, would be the new seed of humanity, the new Adam and Eve. In a stone garden, the first years must have been hell. The cold, the hunger, the fear. Ismael was the only one who knew the way back. He was the guardian of their prison. He taught them how to survive, how to hunt, how to fear those outside. He created his own language, a mixture of Spanish, babbling, and twisted biblical terms. He created his own rituals, the mark on their foreheads, a baptism of blood to seal the pact with their new god, himself. He died about 15 years ago, of a fever. But his law survived. His madness became the only reality his descendants knew. They were trapped, not by walls, but by the geography of a sick mind. Musical pause. The electronic buzz returns, now more aggressive, more dissonant. With the photos, the videos, the GPS coordinates, with the weight of 12 people's souls on her shoulders, Sonia returned to civilization, feeling that she carried with her a truth so powerful that it could move mountains. She would soon discover that bureaucracy is heavier than any mountain. Her first stop, the municipal police station in the nearest town, a small barracks with walls painted a depressing green. The officer on duty, a young man with a sparse mustache and a bored expression, listened to her while chewing gum. Sonia showed him the photos on her digital camera. The pale faces, the frightened eyes, the scars. The officer looked at the images without interest. "Oh, gee," he said. "Who are these people?" "They're the Morales family, and their descendants. They've been living in those caves for 40 years. The officer stopped chewing. He looked at her as if she were crazy. "Miss, with all due respect, they look like huichols, the kind that don't come down much. They're not huichols. They're the grandchildren of Ismael Morales, the one from the 1982 report." The policeman sighed. He got up and went to a rusty filing cabinet. He returned with the folders Sonia already knew. He blew on it to remove the dust. "Case closed," he said, showing her the seal. "It can't be closed. I found them. They're alive." The officer shrugged. It was a gesture Sonia would learn to hate. "Look, this is very old. And those caves are in the high mountains. That's federal jurisdiction, or the Army's. We don't even have the equipment to go up there. Go to Tepic, to the state prosecutor's office." He handed her back the photos. The gum popped again in his mouth. Case closed. Sonia drove the 3 hours to Tepic. With every mile, her anger grew. The image of the indifferent police officer, the popping of his gum, the sound of justice shrugging its shoulders. She felt dirty, contaminated by that apathy. The state prosecutor's office was an imposing building, marble and glass, a maze of corridors and closed doors. After waiting for 4 hours, she managed to see a deputy attorney general, a woman in a tailored suit with a cold smile. She listened patiently, typing on her computer while Sonia spoke. She didn't make eye contact. Not once. "I understand," said the Deputy Attorney General when Sonia finished, her gaze fixed on the monitor. "It's an unusual situation. It's a human tragedy. They need to be rescued. They need medical and psychological help." Yes, of course. "But legally it's complicated. There's no crime being committed. The original kidnapper, this Ismael, is dead. The ones left are there. Because it's the only thing they know. We can't just take them out by force. They could sue us for violating their rights." Sonia couldn't believe what she was hearing. Their rights to live in a cave? Malnourished and sick? The Deputy Attorney General finally looked at her. Her eyes were cold, analytical. "Miss Alarcon, this is now a case of missing persons who have been found. That probably falls under the jurisdiction of another agency. The DFEF because of the minors. Or the National Institute of Indigenous Peoples, if they are considered an isolated community." She looked for a directory on her desk. "Fill out Form 2B. Found Person Report." Attach your evidence, and we'll forward it to the appropriate agency. The system wasn't looking for justice. It was looking to organize horror into folders. Classify it. Label it. File it away until it was someone else's problem. Sonia felt a knot of ice in her stomach. The cold marble of the building seemed to seep into her bones. She left with the 2B form in her hand. It felt like a death certificate. Her last hope, the National Institute of Indigenous Peoples, the INPI. Maybe they, the experts, would understand. The office was a mess of papers, activists, and officials in a hurry. She was received by an area director, Mr. Benitez, a kind man with a goatee and a guayabera shirt. He seemed different. He seemed to care. He listened to her story with genuine interest. He looked at the photos with horror. "This is incredible," he said. "This is a unique case in the history of Mexico." Sonia felt a wave of relief. Finally, someone understood. "We have to act now," she said. "Send a team." Benitez nodded. "Absolutely. But we must do it right, with the proper protocol." And then the wall went up again. "We need to form an interdisciplinary committee," Benitez continued, his tone changing from empathetic to bureaucratic. "Anthropologists, doctors, psychologists, human rights lawyers. First, an observation expedition, no contact. Then, linguistic analysis to attempt communication. It's a process that can take anywhere from 6 months to a year. We don't want to cause them cultural trauma." "The trauma already exists," Sonia exploded. "They're slowly dying." Mr. Benitez frowned. His kindness was gone. "Miss, you are a student. We are professionals. Lives are at stake. We cannot act on impulse. We appreciate your discovery. It is invaluable. Now please let us handle it. Fill out the official community isolation report form. Our team will evaluate it at the next quarterly meeting." The next meeting. Quarterly, 3 months. To start talking about how to start thinking about helping them. Sonia stood up. Her legs were shaking with rage. "You don't want to save them," she said, her voice breaking. "You want to study them. They're your new scientific discovery, your doctoral thesis. They're not people to you. They're specimens." She stormed out of the office, slamming the door behind her. The system wasn't just indifferent. It was vampiric. It wanted to suck the history, the knowledge, the academic prestige out of the tragedy. But help. Help could wait. Final music. The lonely cello returns, but now it sounds fragmented, broken. Sonia gave up. Not on the fight, but on the system. She did the only thing left for her to do. She leaked the story. She gave it to a journalist from an international media outlet. And the world finally found out. The news exploded. Lost tribe found in Mexico. The family that lived in a cave for 40 years. The scandal forced the government's hand. The bureaucracy, embarrassed, moved with unusual speed. In 2 weeks, they organized the rescue. It was a disaster. Helicopters descended on the waterfall. Men in white suits, like astronauts from a nightmare. The Morales reacted with primal terror. They screamed. They hid. They fought. They were sedated so they could be transported. The rescue was an abduction. They were taken to a hospital in Tepic. And there, the world that Ismael feared so much destroyed them. The artificial light, the noises, the clean clothes that burned their skin, the language they didn't understand, and the germs, their immune systems, isolated for 4 decades, had no defenses. A simple cold turned into deadly pneumonia. 3 of them, 2 children, and the older man who had defied Sonia, died in the first month. Multiple organ failure, said the medical reports. It was a clean way of saying they died of civilization. The survivors were taken to a government shelter, a clean place, safe, a prison with windows. They fell into a catatonic depression. They refused to eat. They spent their days in silence, staring at the wall. Psychologists tried to help them. They showed them toys, photos, but it was useless. They had taken away their world, the only one they knew, and they didn't have the tools to build a new one. Salvation was the coup de grace. The last time Sonia saw them, it was through a security glass. She saw the young woman who had looked at her curiously in the cave. She was sitting on the floor of a white, spotless room. Her hair was short, and she was wearing a gray uniform. She wasn't looking at anything. She was simply tracing the shape of a spiral on the linoleum floor with her index finger, over and over again. The mark from the cave. The only home her soul remembered. They had escaped from her grandfather's stone prison, only to be locked up in the prison of our compassion. Sometimes I wonder which is worse, the madness of a man who drags you into darkness, or the logic of a system that, in trying to bring you out into the light, destroys you. The Morales lineage did not end in that cave. It ended in our hospitals, in our shelters, in our good intentions. And that is a reality so sharp that it cuts the soul. And the echo of that cave will never go away.